We are here.
Good evening to all of you. Welcome to the launch of a World in Flux, a festive which is in honor of Dr. Sitaramanji. He is one of India's most respected economists and public intellectuals. Several distinguished Indian and foreign academics, policymakers, and economic analysts and practitioners have made seminal contribution to the festive, covering an extraordinary range of policy issues which would be of interest to both experts and general audience alike. We are extremely grateful to India's Minister of Finance, Honorable Dr.Sitaramanji, for accepting our invitation to be chief guest for this evening and for a very kind assent to launch the book. This has been ably edited by Shri Ashok Bhattacharya, former chief editor of the Business Standard and the author of a much acclaimed series on India's finance ministers from 1947 to 2014, and also Professor Batra of the Jawaharlal University, and the author of the pioneering work entitled India's Trade Policy in the 21st Century. I acknowledge their presence on the dais. And Dr. Acharya, who we are honoring this evening. The Minister has been at the helm, is being launched by her. On behalf of the India International Center, the editors of the book, and its several distinguished contributors, I extend a very warm welcome to Honorable Minister Batra, who is one of the co-editors of this volume, to briefly introduce the book to our audience. Thank you very much for your attention.
Idea of a festive was proposed to Dr. Acharya. The first time, a few years ago, it was met with much resistance from Dr. Acharya, not surprising I would say, given how self-effacing he's always been. However, when we brought up the subject again a couple of years ago, he seemed a little less hesitant, a little more amenable, and we did not want to let go of this opportunity. And hence we set out to take up this project formally about 2 years ago in 2023. The decision to have the title of the festive as A World in Flux, India's Economic Priorities, was not difficult for us. In fact, it came easily to us because by then we'd all had a glimpse of a changing world. Long-standing institutions, economic, foreign policy, trade policy instruments were all being used differently and being questioned more and more. But I have to say, and you can call it a happy coincidence, a pleasant surprise for us, the editors, that the title has become more and more apt as time has passed. The global context that we are in today, none of us would doubt, remains very much in flux. The world economy today is getting increasingly defined by trade protectionism, interventionist industrial policies, and an undermining of the erstwhile rules-based multilateral order. It is therefore important to ask if the old order remains relevant and if the old needs to be replaced by a new. If so, how? What should be its defining parameters? How this global dynamic will impinge upon India's development priorities and the opportunities it will create for India, these were among some of the questions and concerns that helped us define the overarching framework of the festive. With the title and framework in hand, we set out to do some matchmaking between issues that were both relevant and critical in the global and in the Indian context. We tried to match that with people who've had some association in a professional capacity with Dr. Acharya. Again, because of Dr. Acharya's cross-continental and cross-domain working life, we were able to draw upon some of the best minds in India and abroad, minus the two editors. We don't consider ourselves to be in this set, to reflect on issues ranging from climate change, global trade order, reform of multilateral institutions, growth and development, experience of Latin American and Asian economies, to, in the Indian context, macroeconomic policy, agriculture, public finance, digital economy, and urbanization. Overall, for us, the editors, it has been a hugely productive experience. Also for me, I would say, I found a friend in AKB in this journey that has been enjoyable. I hope AKB is going to say the same thing for me. We sincerely hope you will all enjoy reading it as much as we did working on this volume, and that will also provide some useful nuggets for future policy making. Finally, for the launch today, we were again completely aligned in our thinking that a festschrift in honor of the longest serving Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India can be launched only by the longest serving Finance Minister of India.
Institutions being left in a limbo, and not just financial but strategic. Every multilateral institution which serves particular purposes, which have successfully served earlier, are all now wondering where they are, what would be their immediate future, and how is it that they're going to redefine themselves. If I can cross the few sentences and go a bit more, particularly for the financial institutions, because we saw this opportunity during the G20 presidency, and you have one of the authors also who had worked with Professor Shankaracharya during the G20 on the finance track, where he chaired it, one of the committees. We saw an opportunity, and therefore Government of India in the finance track, during the track, picked up on issues which are going to be challenges in the next few years, but top of the agenda was reforming the multilateral financial institutions. We did have a very eminent committee which submitted its report, and at that time it looked as if it gave solutions, and at that time Brazil also showed keen intent in taking that agenda forward, which to an extent they've taken it forward during their presidency, and after that South Africa. But the solutions and the TOR given at that time appear to me, with benefit of hindsight, as having been limited. If you have to go by what you see this flux is before you, we could have given a wider, even more wider terms of reference to that committee, but as time evolves, you only hope that it will settle down. But it is getting complex, more and more complex. So the flux is not for keen observers of global economy or the financial world to observe and tell us. It is there before us, even for a layman to see how complex and how even more compounded it's becoming. So the job of what I would see the observers is, tell us how to get out of it. Tell us, meaning not just India. It's got to be now a newly defined, newly fashioned multilateral institutions, not Bretton Woods 1, okay, Bretton Woods 2 is gone, is it Bretton Woods 3? It's got to be something like, if you could go for a currency with no gold backing sometime in the 70s, now it's already moving towards tokenization. And is that something which we see the depth of? Do we have a measure of it? And do we have a framework to say, can unilaterally countries take the truth? Who's going to who's going to be doing the oversight on these sort of things? And the popular understanding, with support of, let us say, institutions like the FSB, crypto still had questions to answer for institutions, for central banks, for governments. So it's moving rapidly. The flux is not there for us to say, oh yes, it is. It's a dynamic flux. It's moving. And it's probably getting darker and darker because of the depth of complexity.
Thank you. India's economic priorities. So I'm tempted to ask you, what, from your vantage point as the finance minister of the country, do you think are the three topmost economic priorities you as a finance minister would like to be pursued
is the topmost priority. Growth is the topmost priority. And therefore it will have overlap with, do you create jobs, do you have the value